in the process. So that to me is a good example of why you need to keep church and state, separate. So that's called the Bible riots of 1844 in Philadelphia.
And even though we're talking about something that ended up happening in 1844, it's not as if that we haven't seen these sorts of religiously motivated hysteria happening. So I would say the Quran burning, the Pastor Jones, was that Terry Jones? His name is?
Yeah, more religious hysteria.
Certainly there weren't. That wasn't an instance where we were literally talking about people murdering each other, but we were talking about people that were so incensed by their religious bent that they wanted to go out and basically make a statement that was essentially a type of incitement. It was, in as much as I think someone who believes in the First Amendment, and we've said this many times on the show, is that while I think it was absolutely disgusting and not necessary, I would never want them to draft a law stopping Terry Jones or anyone else from burning a Quran publicly if they wanted to, so long as it was their own property.
Yep.
But I would say to him, that's a stupid thing to do because this isn't helping the dialogue, But it's that reaction. It's that, that was, the Bible riots were in 1844. It kind of seemed a little bit like 1844 then. It kind of seemed a little bit like fire and brimstone preachers who really want to get people, who really, they need that attention so much that they want to, they want to make such a spectacle that they're willing to go out and, and cause chaos.
It scares the daylights out of me to think what kind of nation we would be living in if we actually did have a Christian nation and what kind of laws we would pass. There was a video, there's actually several videos on Sharia law. The one I was going to show, and I think it probably is good that we can't show it, because this one was a man who was caught stealing had his right hand surgically removed as punishment. Perfectly healthy guy, but the punishment under Sharia law is that you lose a hand. And we can find no shortage of examples in the Bible where in the Old Testament and the New Testament where you do something wrong, an eye for an eye, the whole thing. If we had religious law in this country, how would that be any different from Sharia law in Afghanistan or Iran?
Right. And this was sort of part of one of the news stories where we said, which is that, the sort of fear factor, the sort of fear that people are inculcated with because they, this is one of the things that makes it sort of hard for me to take, is the fact that there are videos like this where you're kind of seeing the ugly part about a very backwards culture, a culture that really hasn't quite addressed what really is fair punishment, is proportional punishment for crime, and it's based on old doctrine that most nations have decided, yeah, maybe it's not a proportional punishment for someone stealing to maim them for life. My sort of problem with this sort of things, and of course I want to be against when societies are doing horrific things to punish things that are what we would consider otherwise trivial. I would personally, people who want to burn their daughters' genitals with hot rocks, I think those people should go to jail. I literally do think those people should end up going to jail. You should not be able to hide behind a doctrine behind that. But what I'm not willing to do at this point, I'm not willing to want to blanket exclude whole cloth and entire people, because that there are a segment that happen to identify with their religion that happen to behave in ways that we consider to be uncivilized. So that also, I found it very interesting that part of the wording of that was that it was international law and Sharia law. That's a totally different political question, because we do have statutes of international law that have to do with what happens when nations making war with each other. So it just may be one of those things where certain concepts are being demonized by ignorant, very, very ignorant people.
Yep.
We are Ask an Atheist. You can call us in. The number here, as you might see, brilliantly displayed here on state-of-the-art, this is state-of-the-art paper here. You may not know it, but we spent thousands of dollars to bring this to you here, this technology. It's 206-421-5658. We're Ask an Atheist. Call us, ask a question. We want to talk with you. We want to hear more about your, especially if you think that, what do you think we should integrate parts of Sharia law into the United States law? I want to hear what your justification is.
Well, I've got a question for people who'd like to see Christian law implemented in the United States. Whether you're an atheist or a Christian or none of the above, I'd like to hear your idea of what the United States would look like under Christian law, good or bad. I'd like to hear what you think the advantages or disadvantages would be, and how that would be different from the life that we're enjoying now. Because all you have to do is look. In fact, there was a video. One of the videos I was going to show is this very interesting interview with Sarah Palin, and then right after her with Joe Biden, and it was. I think, was it Katie Couric was interviewing them, asking, what is your interpretation of the separation of church and state? And Sarah Palin gave kind of a wishy-washy answer, showing that, number one, she didn't really understand the concept, and sort of, I think, sort of placating the religious right that, you know, she thinks that this is a Christian nation. Joe Biden, on the other hand, answered it just exactly the way it should have been answered, which was, all you have to do is take a look at those nations where they have no separation of church and state, where the church is the state. Places like Iran, Afghanistan, or you could even argue North Korea, the kind of dictatorship they have here, the worship of Kim Jong-il.
Turkmenistan's a good example of that.
Yeah.
Where there is a religion based around the state, you know, not the other way around, but literally.
What would this country look like if this were a Christian nation based on biblical laws? What a scary thought.
I don't know. I think it would be really hard to, it's because, as we always say, that it's the Rorschach test or the big book of multiple choice. Because we have that pesky Old Testament attached to our New Testament, there are all those things like in Leviticus and Exodus that we kind of don't want to talk about. You know, there's some of those things we just don't want to talk about because no one's ever going to think it's acceptable for, you know, for their kids to have to stone their kids to death, to be required to stone their kids to death if they're unruly. You know,
male circumcision is perfectly legal and has been for centuries. Would female circumcision be legal in the United States? Would we allow that? I mean, that's mutilation. And
call us and tell us, 206-421-5658. We are Ask an Atheist, and here we are, atheists, wanting to be asked these questions. Well, let's move along, because I know that you've actually got some other great points around separation of church and state that we haven't got to yet.
Yeah, let's see here. I'd like to find out from viewers how you elect the people you vote for. How do you elect your politicians? Do you want to know first and foremost whether they're Christians? Do you want to know how they would react in an emergency? Do you care about fiscal policy? Or is it all about that one ultimate litmus test that everybody cares about, the abortion issue?
Right.
How do you vote? How do you choose your politicians? For me, the abortion, the litmus test of abortion has been an issue. It's been the way I've voted a lot in the past, because a lot of the other things that are important to me.
I think it should be important that you necessarily talk about your own way to do it. I think that we're very careful here on this show to be able to say that we're not really a show about politics, but this is the one topic for which politics end up intriguing into an issue that we care very deeply about, because we just want to see it being fair for all. So if you're going to talk about the litmus test for how you vote, then just make sure that it's the way Scott would vote.
That's right.
Not the way that all atheists would vote, because I think people who are confused about what atheists are kind of think we're all in lockstep about a lot of things, and that's not true.
And for me, you know, that is an important issue, but I find that a lot of the values that pro-choice candidates have, and I'm including pro-choice Republicans, a lot of their other values are in line with what's important to me. And to me, such as separation of church and state, making sure that we teach science instead of religion in science schools. And it looks like we have a caller, Virginia from Seattle. Virginia, how you doing?
Hi.
Hi, Virginia.
Welcome.
Yeah, I wanted to speak to the subject at hand, and I've been with a feminist group for several years, and there was times when this has come up for discussion, and most doctors refuse to do such things. They're just horrified. I guess once in a while somebody gets paid off and they will do it. There was a very wealthy woman that had it done to her daughter. And
are you talking about female circumcision?
Female circumcision,
Oh, okay. Go on.
But most doctors refuse to do it, even if the party is wealthy, and they also refuse to do it on religious grounds, their own, as well as, you know, it's just plain bad. And I think there is a law prohibiting it now, but I'm not sure on that.
Right, I don't know. I'm not sure. I would be surprised if there were specific local laws prohibiting it by name, genital mutilation.
Abuse.
Yeah, well, this is the thing that we would have a different, you know, atheists wouldn't necessarily have this opinion. I mean, I'm someone who says that, yes, it is child abuse, and it is, it's terrible, especially because it's non-consensual. I mean, when you circumcise your child here, if you're like one of the majority of Americans who circumcise their male child, it's not like that child has consent in this. They can't say no or yes.
Yeah, but they wait until the girl is
right.
Your puberty.
It's the same but very, very different, obviously, because because it's destroying the central bundle of nerve endings that that are the most important parts, and of course they're much, much older, and they can of course say no. So these whole things aren't equivalent, but yes, it should be wrong, and it should be viewed as wrong.
And it's shame and humiliation and degradation for the girl.
But realize that, and this is the point that we often make about this, is whether or not you're talking about just nicking or cutting off entirely parts of the female genitalia, or you're talking about cutting the foreskin off of a penis. You're talking about factors that are entirely religiously motivated. In America, the tradition has gone on for long enough that I don't know if people conceive it as being something that they have taken with them from being Christians, but it's certainly, both of these instances are motivated purely by religious means. There is, I think the medical evidence for the practical nature of male circumcision is dubious at best. I think there have been... It's
been shown to reduce some infections, but overall, there is debate about that.
Right.
But how do you feel about that? Has that been an issue for you?
Virginia?
For your family?
My husband refused to let me have my son circumcised, and he's been very angry with me lately because he goes to gym class and the other kids tease him about it. Oh, you got... I don't know what they say, but anyway, it has to do with the fact that he's not circumcised.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that is horrible, but I don't necessarily know if someone being different is a justification for mutilating them permanently. I know that it is a reason for some people to do things because, quote, that's just the way things are done. But that's a terrible justification because I could use that as my argument for keeping slaves in the 18th century in America. Why do you keep slaves? That's just the way things are done. I think that's a horrible excuse for it. And like I said, I'm not trying to draw equivalency between male circumcision and female circumcision. I think there's an enormous order of magnitude when it comes to female circumcision because it's much, much more devastating and it's much more mutilating. But like I said, the point that we're trying to make is that both of these things are religiously motivated, and there is no agreed upon, undisputed reason why either of those two things should be performed on someone unconsensually that hasn't had its root in religious doctrine, in religious dogma, actually.
Yeah. And there's also, I think, Virginia, maybe you've thought about this, there's a big difference between why you would circumcise a boy and why you would circumcise a girl. In Ethiopia and in some Arab countries, and I believe it started in Africa, I don't think it was started in Arab states, but the reason for female circumcision is to reduce sexual pleasure, and ultimately it's something that I think the men started because of what I can only call sexual insecurity. They're worried that a woman might have her own libido, her own sex drive. You don't see that in the United States, but we do. I mean, if you can go on the web and see no shortage of examples of where a woman is a man's property. She's basically an appliance, and they can do with the woman as they please. You don't see that here, but there's lots of videos of that. Is your husband's objection religious or medical?
I really don't know. He's dead now. He drank himself to death.
Well, sorry to hear that.
Sorry.
Virginia, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the call. We appreciate you calling in and your perspective.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.